Chapter 13. Let's go see what else has changed, Tyler said with a grin. Wednesday stared at him for a moment. You're not at all bothered by this? I am, he said, but I'm more relieved than anything. Like I just woke up from a nightmare. They walked back toward the heart of town, the streets buzzing with celebration. Wednesday blinked at the gaudy decorations, red hearts tangled with jack-o'-lanterns, skeletons holding roses, love poems written in dripping crimson ink. It was like Valentine's Day and Halloween had merged in a terrible accident. She felt disoriented, like the world had tilted slightly off axis. Then they ran into Eden and Ajax. Wednesday. Eden waved enthusiastically. There's a pretend marriage booth down by the fountain. You and Tyler should totally do it, just for fun. Wednesday froze. The idea of a mock wedding, even in jest, was horrifying. The suggestion alone made her fingers twitch with the urge to detonate something. A bouquet, perhaps? Or the entire booth. Her voice came out dry and sharp. What a novel form of public humiliation. Tyler chuckled nervously. Eden clearly thought she was being helpful. But Wednesday's mind was elsewhere, spiraling. Returning to the present had already shaken her, and now this? A grotesque hybrid holiday she may have accidentally invented in the past? The thought made her jaw tighten. If my actions were directly or indirectly responsible for this abomination, she muttered under her breath, then I have only myself to blame. And possibly to strangle. A sudden announcement echoed through the square. Last-minute entries for the town talent show are now open. Final call. Wednesday's head turned sharply. Without a word, she walked straight toward the booth and signed her name. Tyler blinked. Wait, what? Eden and Ajax exchanged looks of shock and delight, whispering excitedly as they hurried to find seats among the growing audience. None of them knew that Wednesday's mind was already spiraling into a darker place, calculating, planning. The chaos of the festival grated against her nerves. The garish decorations, the saccharine joy, the pretend marriage booth, every detail felt like a personal insult. If she couldn't erase this holiday from history, perhaps she could still ruin it in the present. Backstage, Thing frantically tried to distract her. He snapped his fingers in a panic as he watched Wednesday gather random objects from crates, wires, and stray chemicals, anything she could use to build a makeshift explosive. Relax, she muttered, not even looking up. It's just a small one. Thing signed furiously, then shoved something into her hands. It was a violin. Wednesday stared. Where did you get this? Thing hesitated, then signed the word borrowed with exaggerated innocence. She arched a brow. So you stole it. Thing shrugged. With a slow exhale, Wednesday let the violin rest against her side. The tension in her shoulders didn't vanish, but it eased, just a little. Then, with a flourish, Thing pulled out a dress, a high-necked, black cottage-style gown made from soft garden-woven fabric, trimmed in white. Modest, eerie, and oddly poetic. Wednesday eyed it with suspicion, then nodded once and began to change behind the curtain. Whatever this performance turned into destruction, art, or both, she was going to make it unforgettable. The moment Eden texted that Wednesday Addams was entering the town's talent show, the message spread like wildfire. Within minutes, the Nevermore student group chat lit up, and Eden's blog posted a special announcement. Breaking, Wednesday Addams to perform, yes, our Wednesday. Soon, a swarm of students began trickling into the festival grounds, eager for a glimpse of whatever madness she might unleash. Even Principal Weems, Miss Thornhill, and Dr. Kinbot showed up, seated in the middle rows with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. Bianca, Xavier, and Rowan arrived together, jostling for seats with a clear view of the stage. Tyler watched from a few rows ahead, feeling a strange mix of excitement and dread brewing in his chest. Then, a hush fell over the crowd. An old woman emerged from the path behind the seating area, tall, draped in a dramatic, Gothic black dress with sweeping hems and antique lace. Her enormous black hat cast a shadow over her face, and she leaned lightly on a crow-handled umbrella as she walked with poise toward the center of the audience. The students parted instinctively, as if sensing something otherworldly. She took the empty seat right next to Xavier, her posture regal, her presence commanding. Though her hair was gray, her skin was smooth and oddly youthful, like someone who had learned to age on her own terms. Xavier shifted uneasily under her gaze. "You've grown taller," she said, her voice cool and knowing. "Lost most of that baby fat." Xavier stared at her warily. "You're Wednesday's grandmother." The woman smiled, baring perfect teeth. She extended one long finger tipped with a sharp black nail and corrected him sharply. "Grandmama." He nodded quickly, as if fearful she might hex him on the spot. Around him, students whispered to one another, staring wide-eyed at the newest arrival. Even Tyler leaned over to Ajax. "Is that the Addams family matriarch?" Ajax nodded slowly. "I think so, and I think we should be very afraid." At that moment, the lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. The stage curtain began to draw back. Everyone braced themselves. They sat through it all, the tone-deaf singing, clumsy dance routines, even a painfully long kazoo solo. By the time the third magician pulled yet another bunny out of a hat, the Nevermore students were visibly wilting. And through it all, she sat there, Wednesday's grandmama, dressed head to toe in her signature black, umbrella folded neatly in her lap, eyes twinkling with mischief and pride. The sheer absurdity of her being seated in the middle of them like some kind of Gothic royalty made the students and staff squirm in their seats. Then came the moment. When Wednesday Addams's name was called, Grandmama clapped enthusiastically, startling everyone within a 10-foot radius. "That's my granddaughter," she cried, as if she were cheering for a blood sacrifice. Wednesday strode onto the stage, a vision of eerie composure. She wore a high neckline, black cottage-style dress trimmed in white lace, the fabric soft but structured, like morning attire tailored for a Victorian picnic. Black cotton stockings and polished Mary Jane pumps added a childlike edge to the solemn outfit. Her signature braids had been undone and artfully wrapped around her crown like a dark halo, giving her an unsettlingly pristine appearance. Then she lifted the violin and began to play. Vivaldi's Winter, each note sharp, icy, and executed with haunting perfection. The air felt colder somehow. Her bow sliced across the strings with elegance and fury, as though the stormy concerto echoed her inner state. The audience was mesmerized. Even the jaded Nevermore faculty sat up straighter. Principal Weems smiled softly. Miss Thornhill clutched her chest with delight. When the final note rang out and the stage fell into silence, Grandmama stood up and clapped with a force that could wake the dead. "Bravo! That's my girl," she shouted, wiping a proud tear that may or may not have been made of embalming fluid. Wednesday, cool and unflinching, offered a small curtsy and stepped back. As the top three were announced, there was no surprise when Wednesday's name was called. The crowd clapped politely, some hesitantly, as if unsure how to cheer for someone who looked like she might hex the microphone. Grandmama beamed, practically salivating with triumph. "The others don't even come close," she muttered under her breath. But then, first place was announced. And it wasn't Wednesday. Her name wasn't called. Someone else, a wide-eyed boy who had balanced apples on his nose and sang a song about marshmallows, took the top prize. There was a moment of stunned silence as Wednesday's face slowly turned into a porcelain mask of rage. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes narrowed. The audience sensed a disturbance in the force. Grandmama's smile faltered. Her proud stance gave way to worried grandmotherly instinct. She leaned forward, hands clutching her umbrella, clearly preparing to leap in and comfort her favorite grandchild. But Wednesday didn't wait. She marched off stage with unnerving calm, only to return moments later with what could only be described as a makeshift bomb, wires, kitchen timers, and tubes that looked suspiciously like old plumbing. "I've had enough," Wednesday declared coldly, setting the object center stage. This town is a waking nightmare, and every hour of this day has been worse than the last. This festival of pastel madness, this theatrical circus of fools ends now. She set the timer, turned on her heel, and strode off stage without another word. The crowd froze. Then chaos erupted. Principal Weems nearly fainted. Miss Thornhill shouted something about calling security. Dr. Kinbot looked like she needed therapy herself. Students screamed. Parents dragged their children from the front row. Vendors abandoned their booths. Even Xavier, Ajax, and Bianca were frozen for a moment before scrambling to run. Tyler blinked, unsure whether to laugh or panic. "Is it real?" he asked. Eden grabbed his arm. "Does it matter? She made a bomb." Backstage, Thing facepalmed so hard his fingers smacked against his palm with audible frustration. Grandmama simply sighed, retrieved a monocle from her coat, and peered at the bomb. I give it a 7.5 for effort. Would have gone with nitroglycerin, she said before leaving. Fortunately, the explosion wasn't caused by gunpowder. Wednesday wasn't that reckless. But it was loud. Loud enough to send a shockwave through the air, rattle nearby windows, and fill the venue with a thick cloud of black smoke. Screams rang out as the entire audience scattered. No one was hurt, thankfully. Wednesday had timed it just right. Everyone had just enough time to run. The stage, however, did not survive. Neither did the hand-painted festival banners, the lighting rig, or the very expensive chocolate fountain donated by the town council. So naturally, the next stop was the police station. Wednesday sat calmly in the small holding room, her hands folded neatly on the table as if she were waiting for tea. Across the glass, Principal Weems, Dr. Kinbot, and Miss Thornhill gave their testimonies, looking more exasperated than shocked. This was, after all, a Wednesday Addams incident. One by one, the Nevermore students were called in. Ajax tried to downplay everything, but nearly choked when asked to describe the bomb. Eden defended Wednesday to a fault, even calling the explosion cathartic. Tyler just stared at the floor and muttered that he should have known she was planning something. When Wednesday was finally released, she was met with someone she least expected. Standing in the hallway, arms crossed over her enormous black shawl and a proud smile spreading across her powdered face, was Grandmama Addams. Wednesday blinked. "You came?" "I always come for a felony," Grandmama said, sweeping forward and pulling her into a dramatic hug. Everyone stared. Principal Weems's mouth parted in disbelief. Dr. Kinbot looked like she might faint. Even Sheriff Galpin did a double take. But instead of scolding her granddaughter, Grandmama turned to the crowd of adults and declared she was right to blow it up. That talent show was an insult to the word talent. Anyone with functioning ears could tell Wednesday outperformed them all. "Mrs. Addams," Sheriff Galpin interjected, "you shouldn't be encouraging this behavior. She caused thousands of dollars in property damage." "Oh, please, Sheriff." Grandmama waved him off with a gloved hand. The fountain was tacky. The lights were an eyesore. And those other contestants? A bunch of flailing toddlers with stage fright. Wednesday gave them culture. Sheriff Galpin opened his mouth to argue, but Grandmama had already moved on, cupping Wednesday's face with her cool hands and kissing her firmly on the forehead. "Next time, darling, we'll just bribe the judges so you win. Clearly, merit means nothing to these people." "I didn't do it because I lost," Wednesday said dryly. "I just needed an excuse to blow something up." Grandmama laughed, delighted. "Even better. The town looked like a giant greeting card. I nearly threw up in the fountain myself." In the background, Dr. Kinbot muttered, "I feel like I'm hallucinating." Principal Weems simply pinched the bridge of her nose. "We'll handle this internally," she said through clenched teeth. Just as Wednesday was about to exit the station with Grandmama proudly on her arm, the double doors slammed open. In strode the mayor, red-faced, drenched from the sudden downpour outside, and clearly ready to make an example out of someone. "Miss Addams," he barked, pointing a trembling finger. "We are pressing charges." That stunt you pulled caused thousands in damages. You're looking at community service at best and expulsion from Nevermore at worst." The room fell silent. Then Grandmama stepped forward. Slowly, deliberately, like an old war general preparing to unleash a curse. "You listen to me, you soggy little bureaucrat," she said, voice dangerously calm. "You think you can threaten my granddaughter over a little smoke and creative expression?" She detonated a bomb. The mayor shouted, incredulous. "It was an art installation," Grandmama snapped. "The world needs a little shock therapy these days." And besides, she narrowed her eyes and stepped closer. "You're not really going to press charges. Because if you do, I will personally fund every opponent that ever runs against you for the next 20 years. The mayor opened his mouth, but Grandmama didn't stop. "I will buy billboards, I will dig up your high school GPA, and I will leak that very interesting dossier I have on your little retreat to Mamaroneck in 2019. The one with the photographs." She leaned in, eyes gleaming. "I own the photographer." The mayor paled. You wouldn't." "Oh, I would. I have. And if you so much as whisper the word expulsion, I'll make sure your name becomes synonymous with electoral failure." Silence again. The kind of silence that swallows entire rooms. That's when Miss Thornhill lost it. "This is outrageous," she blurted. "Who do you think you are?" Grandmama turned slowly, her wide-brimmed black hat casting a long shadow across the marble floor. "I am Eudora Addams," she said, voice as cold as iron and twice as sharp. "And no, charges will not be pressed. And no, my granddaughter will not be expelled." Miss Thornhill looked like she had just bitten into a lemon. Principal Weems stepped forward then, trying to smooth things over with the tiniest shred of dignity left. "Let's take a breath. I believe this matter can be resolved internally." The mayor cleared his throat, tugged at his wet collar, and mumbled something about taking time to reevaluate. Grandmama dusted her hands off and turned to Wednesday with a satisfied grin. "See, darling? This is why it pays to have skeletons in everyone's closet, especially if you help bury them." Wednesday gave a single nod. "Next time, I want to bring the actual explosives." "Next time," Grandmama agreed cheerfully, "we'll both bring them." As the tension in the police station hung heavy in the air, Dr. Kimbot stepped forward cautiously, notebook clutched tightly against her chest. "By any chance," she began gently, her voice tinged with hesitation, "is your family, your Addams lineage, connected to the Addams mentioned in the town's stone monument?" Eudora tilted her head, the corners of her lips twitching upward. "If that Addams was spelled with a double D," she said slowly, "then yes. That would be us." A beat of silence. She leaned slightly forward. "We built this town. We founded Nevermore and this town." A chill swept through the room. "So, if you think," she continued, tone sharpening, "that you can expel my granddaughter, you are, quite frankly, delusional." Everyone stood frozen as Grandmama casually pulled out a thick black leather checkbook from her purse. She scrawled her signature with a flourish, ripped out the check, and deliberately left the amount blank. She handed it to the mayor like one might offer a dog a bone. "For the damages," she said with a mocking sweetness. "Write whatever number makes you feel powerful." The mayor took the check with shaking hands, eyes wide. Then, in a jarring contrast to her political savagery, Grandmama turned to Wednesday and melted. She cupped her granddaughter's pale face in both hands, pressing her sharp, talon-like nails lovingly into Wednesday's cheeks, just enough to leave tiny crescent marks. "My precious little anarchist," she cooed. "I am so proud of you." Tyler, Eden, and Ajax all flinched slightly at the sight. Bianca leaned in to whisper, "That got to hurt." Grandmama ignored them, her eyes locked on Wednesday. Her tone dropped into a low, commanding murmur. "Now, win the regional fencing tournament." Wednesday remained expressionless. "Yes, Grandmama." Eudora grinned like a satisfied witch after a hex well cast. She draped one arm around Wednesday and pulled her close, resting her chin delicately atop her granddaughter's head. There they stood, regal and sinister, the matriarch and her prodigy, a living portrait of eerie elegance and generational wrath. And in that moment, everyone understood exactly why Wednesday was so messed up. How could she not be, when her family didn't just excuse her chaos, they encouraged it? No talk of consequences. No lessons learned. Just blank checks, backhanded compliments, and blatant favoritism for destruction dressed as talent. Sheriff Galpin folded his arms, jaw clenched. This is exactly the problem. She blew up town property and no one's even pretending it's wrong. Principal Weems sighed, muttering under her breath, "At this rate, I might as well let the students run the school." Miss Thornhill raised an eyebrow and crossed her arms. "We're setting a dangerous precedent here. If we reward this kind of behavior, who's next?" A pyromancer with stage fright. Dr. Kimbot, who had been silent, finally said, "Reinforcement like this, it's not just enabling. It's psychological damage." The mayor rubbed his temples as if trying to massage away his political nightmares. Meanwhile, Eden leaned closer to Xavier, Bianca, Rowan, and Ajax. "This is exactly what I meant the first time I met her," she whispered. "Her parents said she had no curfew. And remember how she got off clean after blowing up her last school's gymnasium?" The others exchanged glances, equal parts disbelief and acceptance. It all made perfect sense now. And yet, Tyler stood off to the side, watching Wednesday and her grandmother with an unreadable expression. A small, soft smile curved on his lips, clearly touched. Chapter 14. The door to the sheriff's station creaked open as the cold afternoon wind swept in. The group was just about to disperse when the desk phone inside rang again. The sheriff's assistant answered, spoke a few quick words, then stiffened slightly. After hanging up, the phone rang a second time. This time her brows drew together. She finally walked briskly over to the group just outside the door. "Sir," she said, addressing Sheriff Galpin, "we just got 2 reports, one from a music shop and one from a boutique in town. Both had items missing from their inventory this afternoon. A black dress and a black violin. No payment records. The owners want to report them stolen." All eyes turned to Wednesday. She blinked once, deadpan. "What did you expect me to do?" she asked coolly. "If I ran all the way back to Nevermore to fetch my cello and change into something performance-appropriate, I'd have been late." Eudora Addams clucked her tongue and wrapped her arms tighter around her granddaughter. "Just add it to the check for damages," she said dismissively. "Artists must improvise." Outside, the sky had gone dusky as they stepped into the crisp, early spring air. Principal Weems turned sharply. "This cannot go without punishment." To her shock, Grandmama agreed. "Of course," she said airily. "Wednesday will attend and win the regional fencing tournament. That should keep her out of trouble for a week at least." "She? What?" Weems blinked. "Nevermore did qualify, didn't it? Ajax, Yoko, Eden, Bianca, Xavier, and Rowan all groaned at once. But the tournament's during spring break." Eden protested. "Yeah, it's a total hassle," Ajax added. "Doesn't it take place somewhere up in the mountains?" Rowan asked. "We have to drive 6 hours?" "I'll make it worth your while," Eudora said smoothly. "I'll cover your hotels, meals, activities, skiing, spas, snowmobile chases. Whatever helps you recover from the trauma of that god-awful talent show. Just tell me where it's held." Eden's eyes lit up. "The tournament's near a small mountain town, quiet venue, barely anything around. But there's a ski and hot springs resort not far from it, just a short drive past the state border." "Perfect," Grandmama smiled wickedly. "I'll have Adele handle it. She will contact the best resort nearby and reserve rooms for everyone." The Nevermore students erupted in cheers. Eden hooped. Bianca smirked. Xavier looked slightly impressed for once. But Tyler and Wednesday stood at the edge, silent, eyes locked. Miss Thornhill and Weems exchanged looks of disbelief. "Is this okay? Can this be considered bribery?" Thornhill muttered. "I'll talk to the school board about it." Weems whispered. "Eudora, already scanning the students again, caught sight of someone unfamiliar. She narrowed her eyes at Tyler. "And who are you?" she asked. "He's a friend," Wednesday answered evenly. "Just a friend." Grandmama snorted. "You don't have friends. And certainly not some average normie." She gave him a long, piercing stare. "So tell me, my little criminal, what is he? A monster? A killer? A psychopath?" Tyler flinched, his heart suddenly racing. He couldn't understand why, but her words gave him an easy feeling. The words hit the group like a thunderclap. Everyone's eyes widened. They exchanged awkward glances, thinking Eudora's standards were just bizarrely intense. Eden whispered to Bianca, "She thinks dating a normie is worse than blowing up a stage?" Xavier muttered, "Her grandma's next level messed up." Yoko raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Rowan shifted uncomfortably. Even Principal Weems pursed her lips, looking vaguely concerned. Miss Thornhill, however, flinched. She took a single, careful step back, and her eyes flicked between Tyler and Wednesday, an edge of suspicion blooming behind her polite mask. But when Wednesday stiffened and answered with a firm glare, "He's Tyler," and then added sharply, "Just a normie." "That's it." Thornhill blinked once, then gave a small, tight-lipped smile, the tension fading from her face. Dr. Kimbot wrote something in her notebook again, probably unrelated, but the word normie was underlined twice. Wednesday growled inwardly. Her grandmother always knew exactly how to dig beneath her surface. Grandmama gave Tyler a long, contemplative look. "Would you be willing to spend a holiday with us, Tyler?" Tyler looked stunned, as if he'd just been asked to eat dinner with a pack of wolves. Yes. Yeah. Of course." Wednesday's arms dropped to her sides. "This day just kept getting worse. I want to see how my granddaughter's doing in school." "Shall we?" Grandmama said briskly. The Nevermore students exchanged glances and began boarding the school bus. Wednesday followed them, expression unreadable. Before stepping up, she looked back. Tyler stood on the sidewalk, watching. He offered a small smile, but she said nothing. Neither did he. The bus door closed between them. Grandmama, meanwhile, stepped into her black classic Cadillac, the kind that looked like it ran on curses and grave dirt. Her zombie-like butler opened the door with stiff courtesy before climbing into the driver's seat and letting out a groan that might have once been a word. Later, after the drive up the misty roads to Nevermore Academy, Grandmama entered through the main doors, heels echoing through the entry hall. The students filed in behind her, and together they approached the central rotunda, the heart of the building. At its center stood a weather-worn statue. A young boy shielding a girl from rising flames, the building collapsing around them, their faces turned upward as if daring fate to strike again. It was raw, noble, tragic. Wednesday stopped and stared. "How come I didn't know we founded this school?" she asked. "You always talked about Nevermore like we just attended. You never said we built it." The others gathered. Eden, Xavier, Bianca, Ajax, Yoko, Rowan, as well as Principal Weems and Miss Thornhill. Everyone waited quietly. "We didn't," Grandmama replied, gazing at the statue. "She did." She gestured to the girl in the statue. Friday Addams. One of the most exceptional Addams to ever live. "It's a tragedy she died so young." Then her voice took on a reverent tone. "She wasn't just a student or a builder. She was the founder, Nevermore's first teacher. She taught the outcast children herself during the Normie, outcast war of the 1620s. At a time when most were hunted or hiding, Friday gave them hope. She made a promise," Grandmama continued, "that when the war ended, she would build a place where outcasts could learn safely. And she kept that promise. That's the kind of Addams she was. You know what they say, Friday's child is loving and giving." She smiled faintly, eyes not leaving the statue. She even designed the original exterior and interior of Nevermore. Her blueprints should still be in the school archives, along with her writings. If I'm not mistaken, her portrait is also hidden along with those writings. A hush fell over the group. Then Eden perked up. Wait, seriously? That stuff's here. Without missing a beat, she grabbed Yoko by the sleeve. Come on, we're going to the library. Yoko gave a sigh, but let her drag her along. Things slipped out of Wednesday's bag and scurried after them, claws tapping excitedly on the marble floor. Principal Weems was skeptical of Grandmama's claims. There are no such writings or portraits in the library, she said flatly. Grandmama laughed softly. Of course not. You won't find anything if you're not looking. Miss Thornhill chimed in, smirking. Maybe she's just sending us on a wild goose chase. Grandmama shot Miss Thornhill a suspicious glance. And what is a normie doing in this school? Before Thornhill could respond, Principal Weems stepped in firmly. Times have changed. We should be open to new possibilities. Grandmama turned her sharp gaze on Weems. You should be more suspicious of people. Blind trust can hurt you. Curious about how she became a devoted saint in history, Wednesday followed Eden, Yoko, Xavier, Bianca, and Ajax, along with Thing, to the dusty library. She enlisted Rowan's help as well. Nothing here but books, Bianca said, waving her hand dismissively. Maybe she was lying, Rowan suggested suspiciously. Watch it, Wednesday warned. Why would my grandmother lie about something like this? You're just not looking in the right place. Wednesday thought back to when she had sketched the layout of Nevermore, adding twigs for hidden passages and secret compartments. If the builders followed her instructions in the letter, one of those compartments should be here. After a few minutes, Eden gave up. Xavier asked, Where do you think it could be? Wednesday's eyes caught an old bookshelf tucked into a strange corner near the window. She pulled a book from the shelf, dusted off its faded, hand-bound cover, and noticed something odd. She accidentally kicked a pile of books at the bottom and realized they slid further into the wall than they should have. Lying down to look closer, she saw faint light coming from an empty space behind the bookshelf space. She tried moving the shelf. It wouldn't budge, so she pulled the books out from the bottom row. Hey, did you find anything? Eden called from the doorway. Wednesday was already crawling into the narrow opening. Moments later, she called everyone over. Inside the secret compartment, all that awaited was a crate. Wednesday opened it carefully. Inside were her own writings, instructions, lesson plans, all rolled into scrolls. She found her original sketch of Nevermore's interior. Holding it up against the window, the hidden passages marked on the map aligned perfectly with the school's structure. She rolled the sketch back and placed the scrolls carefully into the crate, pushing it through the opening. Eden jumped for joy as Wednesday emerged from the secret compartment. Wednesday said nothing. She would never admit to being Friday Addams. Principal Weems stared at Grandmama, who was smiling proudly as she flipped through Wednesday's academic records, stellar grades, perfect scores, and glowing remarks from every teacher. Weems had to admit, Wednesday was a model student, the kind any school would be proud to have. The ideal daughter. The ideal grandchild. If only she weren't such a misfit. Always getting into trouble. Always causing problems. Before Weems could say anything, the door burst open. A frantic teacher rushed in, breathless. You need to come to the rotunda. Now. When they reached the rotunda, students and faculty had already gathered around the statue of Friday Addams and Tyler Galpin. A wooden crate sat open at its base, filled with old scrolls, notebooks, and parchment sheets. At the front, someone had carefully placed a preserved grade sheet, every mark perfect. Teachers moved in to examine the contents. Professor Cartwright unrolled one of the scrolls. Latin. Structured and annotated. These aren't school assignments, this is instruction. Miss Flint flipped through a small bound volume. Lesson plans. She cross-referenced botany with alchemy. There are even tests. There's field research, added Professor Yu, examining another scroll. Charts on plant toxicity, ecological impact, detailed classifications. This would take years. She was still a teenager, muttered one teacher. Principal Weems unfolded a larger parchment. This is the full blueprint of Nevermore. The drawing was precise. Every window, staircase, and tower lined up with the school as it stood now. Even the exterior, gargoyles, ironwork, the sloped rooftops, was exactly as they knew it. Miss Thornhill stepped closer. "It's uncanny." "It's not uncanny," Eden said. "It's the school. That's literally our hallway. And that's the greenhouse path." Bianca leaned in. "She really did design Nevermore." "I think so, look. This looks just like that handwriting." Professor Cartwright tilted the parchment slightly, inspecting it more closely. "Careful," Wednesday finally said, her voice cutting through the awe. "That parchment you're manhandling is over 400 years old." Cartwright stiffened mid-motion. "Right. Of course." Miss Flint immediately set the scroll she was holding back down with exaggerated delicacy. "Good Lord. For centuries." Professor Yu blinked and took a small step back, as though afraid breathing too hard might make it crumble. Principal Weems cleared her throat. "Let's keep everything flat and untouched. We'll prepare a preservation case immediately." Wednesday stood at the back of the group, arms folded. Her eyes were fixed on the blueprint, but she said nothing more. Because she knew what they didn't. The passageways. The compartments. The fail-safes. They were all there, but not visible to the naked eye. Not unless you knew to check for them. And not unless you knew how. She remained silent, letting the others fawn over the brilliance of Friday Addams, her past self. Let them admire the visible work. "Oh my God," Eden whispered, her hands trembling as she held up the parchment. She stared at Wednesday, then slowly turned the sketch around for everyone to see. A collective gasp swept through the rotunda, even Grandmama's eyes widened. Drawn in precise, lifelike detail were two girls. Both wore their hair in braided pigtails. Both had the same eerie, unreadable expression. And both looked exactly like Wednesday. Instead of reacting, Wednesday tilted her head and asked flatly, "Which one do you think is Friday?" Grandmama let out a laugh. "I'd nearly forgotten. Friday had a twin sister." "Goody." "Yeah, but," Wednesday narrowed her eyes, stepping closer to the parchment. "Which one's Friday?" She studied the sketch. The artist hadn't drawn in bangs on either girl, likely inaccurate, as even the old Pilgrim World painting had omitted them. The resemblance was unsettling and frustrating. "Adam's genetics are scary," Eden muttered, carefully laying the parchment down on a nearby table. Too quickly. Principal Weems stepped forward with a sharp tone. "Miss Sinclair, that parchment is over 4 centuries old. Please handle it like a sacred artifact, not a crumpled exam." Eden froze. Sorry, Principal Weems," she mumbled, her cheeks flushing as she backed away slightly. Weems sighed but nodded, then glanced toward the parchment with a touch more reverence. "It survived plagues, wars, fires. It shouldn't have to survive teenage hands too." The drawing, now safely resting on the table, was stunning in its detail, charcoal strokes layered over aged parchment, the lines still sharp despite the centuries. One twin, blonde, clutched a worn spellbook to her chest. The other, with darker hair, stood slightly apart with a disembodied hand perched on her shoulder. "I think this one's Friday," Eden said, pointing to the girl holding the book. Wednesday's lip curled ever so slightly. Goody did look less menacing than she remembered. With a reputation as clean as a saint's, she thought dryly, of course they'd assume Goody was Friday. Wednesday looked up. "And what makes you think she's Friday?" Eden shrugged. "Because she's holding a book." Friday was a teacher, right? It was sound logic. The teachers murmured in agreement, nodding thoughtfully. Everyone, that is, except Wednesday. She said nothing, but her eyes lingered on the spellbook in the sketch. She recognized the pattern on its spine, distinct and strange. And she made a note to examine it. As soon as she was alone, Principal Weems stepped forward with finality in her tone. "Everything here, every scroll, every drawing needs to be brought to my office immediately." Carefully, The students and teachers began gathering the items with reverent hands, speaking in hushed voices. Miss Thornhill, still staring at the table, suddenly asked the million-dollar question. She turned to Grandmama, arms crossed. "If you knew about this historic collection all along, why didn't you tell anyone?" Wednesday Addams barely flinched. Instead, she tilted her head and replied coolly, "Why would you make yourself an outcast among outcasts by coming to the school?" The room went quiet. Miss Thornhill said nothing, her lips pressed together, her eyes unreadable. Principal Weems exhaled sharply, breaking the silence. "That's enough. What matters now is that Mrs. Addams did tell us, and these documents are now in our possession. Better late than never." She glanced down at the scrolls with narrowed eyes, her tone shifting. "Though these are far too fragile to simply sit in my office." She turned to Professor Cartwright. "We need to contact a professional conservator immediately. Someone with experience in ancient parchment preservation." "And a historian," added Miss Flint, her voice low but steady. "Preferably with knowledge of colonial or early American educational design." Weems nodded. "Agreed. I'll make arrangements by the end of the day. These documents need to be authenticated and preserved properly. They're not just Addams family artifacts. They're pieces of Nevermore's origin story." Grandmama gave a dry chuckle. "And here I thought you'd just keep them in a broom closet." Weems didn't rise to the jab. "They'll be protected, I assure you." She looked back at the students, Wednesday especially. "And perhaps this is something worth celebrating after all." After the bombshell of the relic's discovery and the chaos of the school's emergency lockdown, Nevermore should have been reeling. But just as quickly as the dust had settled, something new took center stage. With the fencing tournament only days away, Coach Vlad swept in with an announcement that sent the student body into a frenzy and gave Wednesday a welcome, if temporary, distraction from the increasingly strange timeline they were living in. Chapter 15. The Nevermore fencing team barely had time to think about the ancient relics recently discovered on campus. Coach Vlad had just announced that they'd be staying at a 5-star ski resort for an entire week during the upcoming tournament. The common room exploded in cheers. Everyone was ecstatic, everyone except Wednesday. She sat quietly in her usual corner at the weather vane, a faint scowl on her face. Unlike the others, she had one goal for the school trip: win the fencing competition and bring home the trophy for Nevermore. She took a sip of her coffee, ignoring the buzz of excitement around her. Tyler walked over and set down her quad espresso. "You worried?" Wednesday didn't look at him. "I'm the only one focused on winning. Everyone else is already planning what they'll do after they lose." He leaned on the table, smirking. "Just do your best. You've never had a problem going solo before. Besides, isn't fencing an individual competition?" "It's both," Wednesday replied flatly. "There's an individual round, but points also go toward a team score. In the end, both matter." Tyler nodded. "Sounds about right." "Like the Olympics." He hesitated, then shifted the topic. "So, what happened with those relics? Have they been verified?" "Historians and a professional conservator are looking into it now," she said with a sigh. "Even the mayor showed up. I'm sure he wants to use my writing to boost the town's historical value or his re-election campaign." Tyler grinned. "I heard you also found an old portrait of you and thing?" "Yeah. He hasn't shut up about his likeness since," she muttered. "Apparently, he thinks he deserves credit for being immortalized in charcoal." Tyler chuckled but grew quiet. "Are you still planning to leave?" Wednesday finally looked at him, her face unreadable but her voice precise. "I am leaving, this afternoon, for the fencing competition." She paused before adding, more quietly, "I'm putting my plans to leave Nevermore on hold, until I can figure out how the hell we ended up in the past and back again." She crossed her arms. "I reread Goody's old grimoire last night. Still the same. I've practically memorized the damned thing front to back." "You'll figure it out," Tyler said, trying to reassure her. He knew how she got when she hit a dead end, obsessed, irritable, and just a little dangerous. Wednesday gave no reply, but her eyes narrowed slightly, fixed on something far away. Meanwhile, back at Nevermore, historians moved carefully around the long oak tables in the library, marveling at the documents spread out before them. The air was filled with the reverent kind of silence, broken only by the occasional gasp or whispered exclamation. "I still can't believe how well-preserved everything is," one of them murmured, gently adjusting a scroll with gloved hands. "Remarkable for something over 400 years old." Another nodded. "We'll need to frame these immediately before any further exposure causes damage." Principal Weems stood nearby, arms crossed, but her gaze thoughtful. Even she couldn't hide her awe. "There, exquisite," a historian whispered, eyes scanning the delicate sketches and elegant script. "We've always heard of Friday Addams' genius, rumors, oral histories, but never had any tangible evidence." "Well," a third historian said, glancing up, "now the evidence is staring us right in the face." The mayor, who had arrived half an hour earlier, leaned in and shook his head in disbelief. "Can you believe this was hidden inside Nevermore this whole time?" "We're still assessing," the lead historian said. "But it's very possible. These were clearly meant to be protected." The mayor frowned slightly, hands clasped behind his back. "How can you be sure the writing is actually Friday Addams? I mean, no offense, but isn't this a pretty bold claim?" Another historian responded, "Because Friday Addams is said to have drafted the terms of surrender that ended the Normies' outcast war of the 1620s. She also transcribed the negotiations before her execution. Those original documents are preserved in the Eastwick archives. All we need to do is compare the handwriting, linguistic patterns, and parchment age to confirm authorship." Principal Weems stepped forward. "And the old blueprints? Can they be verified too?" "We're in luck," the historian replied, gesturing to a stack of diagrams. "Her personal notes contain exact measurements and architectural annotations. If the measurements align with the current Nevermore structure, and by early review they do, we'll have undeniable proof that she designed it." He paused, flipping through a bundle of sketches. She was incredibly meticulous, almost obsessively so. She even accounted for load-bearing walls and sun exposure by season. "It's astonishing, especially for someone completely self-taught." "Self-taught and brilliant," another added in awe. The mayor cleared his throat. "Well, then, once the verification is complete, I want to host a public exhibition. All of it, blueprints, scrolls, illustrations, everything. We'll invite outcasts from all over. This could be one of the greatest discoveries in our town's history." He smiled to himself. "Imagine the headlines." Weems raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. That afternoon, the Nevermore fencing team boarded the school bus, buzzing with excitement. Eden dragged a mildly reluctant Wednesday along with her, already planning matching routines and warm-ups. Tyler stood by the curb to see her off, handing her a cup of coffee for the road. "In case you need anything," he said, offering her a small slip of paper. "It's my number." Wednesday took it with a nod, tucking it into her coat pocket. The team arrived at their first hotel that evening, just a simple accommodation near the tournament venue. The fencing matches would begin the next day. When they arrived at the tournament the following morning, Wednesday groaned as she caught sight of her cousin Adele, waving enthusiastically from the bleachers. "What are you doing here?" Wednesday asked, narrowing her eyes. "Grandmama's orders," Adele said cheerfully. "I'm under strict instruction to keep you from bailing right after the tournament. And I'm filming all your matches, so no pressure." Despite her irritation, Wednesday fought fiercely and cleanly. In her first match, her opponent lunged too early. Wednesday pivoted on her back foot, letting the blade flash past her shoulder before countering with a sharp, precise thrust that landed square on target. The referee's whistle blew. Point. Nevermore. Her footwork was elegant and unyielding, each step calculated, each parry efficient. She didn't waste movement. Her eyes never left her opponent's, her expression unreadable behind the dark mesh of her mask. A second match brought a cocky boy from an elite academy who smirked at her during introductions. He didn't smirk for long. Wednesday feinted left, drew out his defense, and then struck his side in a blink. 2 more rapid points followed, clean hits that silenced the crowd. By the semifinals, murmurs had spread. Who was the girl in black with the unshakable calm and the deadly precision? Eden cheered wildly from the sideline. That's our death angel. Go, Wednesday. Adele didn't miss a single moment. Her phone was up, capturing every lunge, every dodge, every point that widened the gap between Wednesday and her challengers. The final match was the most grueling. Her opponent was taller, aggressive, and fast. The score stayed even for most of the bout. Sweat trickled down Wednesday's neck. She adjusted her grip, ignored the crowd, and focused only on timing. One mistake. That's all she needed. And there it came, a missed parry, a breath too long before resetting. Wednesday lunged, striking with such precision that her blade rang out as it touched her opponent's chest. Point. Match. Victory. The referee raised her arm. The room exploded in applause. Adele let out a whoop. That's my cousin. The whole team rushed forward to hug and high-five her. Eden half lifted her off the ground in celebration. Wednesday barely smiled, but her eyes flickered with something close to satisfaction. Guess what? Adele grinned, practically bouncing on her heels. Grandmama booked us a new place for the rest of the trip, a 5-star ski and hot springs resort. Pack your gear. We're checking in tonight. For a second, the fencing team just stared. Then chaos erupted. Eden shrieked. Are you kidding me? Hot springs. I didn't even pack my face masks. Xavier spun his fencing mask in the air. I knew this trip was going to be legendary. Ajax was already Googling the resort. It has room service. And heated floors. Heated floors, guys. Bianca smirked, arms crossed. Well, at least we'll be celebrating in style. Only Wednesday remained quiet, adjusting the strap of her bag with a flat expression. Great, she muttered. The only thing worse than forced fun is luxury forced fun. But even she couldn't completely tune out the laughter and the excited scramble to pack. The whole team moved like a hive, chattering about slopes, jacuzzis, and how they were definitely rubbing this in Nevermore's face once they got back. Adele was dragging Wednesday toward her car, chattering excitedly about their resort suite and how the hot springs were supposed to clear your pores and your soul. But suddenly, Wednesday froze mid-step. Her body stiffened, breath catching in her throat. Then it hit. A cold, bone-deep shiver. Her pupils dilated, and the world around her blurred as a vision crashed over her like a wave of ice. She saw trees, dense, wet, and breathing with fog. Then a figure running. Fast, desperate. From the shadows, something surged forward. A monstrous shape, hulking and grotesque. The hide, its eyes glowed with savage hunger. Its claws extended like sickled knives. And it was Tyler. His body contorted violently, bones shifting beneath his skin, face elongating into something unrecognizable. His scream, raw and human, was lost as the transformation completed. Then he lunged, pouncing on the runner, and everything went red. The crack of bone. A wet gasp. Wednesday jerked back, heart pounding. Her eyes snapped open. The snowy parking lot came rushing back into view, too bright, too normal. Adele turned, her grip loosening on Wednesday's wrist. Whoa, are you okay? You just stopped walking. Wednesday didn't answer right away. Her fingers twitched like she'd been shocked. Slowly, she looked at Adele. I need to borrow your phone, she said, voice low and sharp with urgency. Adele frowned. What? Why? Please. Just give it to me. Okay, get in the car first, then you can have it, Adele said, unlocking the passenger door and handing her the phone once they were inside. Wednesday pulled out the slip of paper Tyler had given her and stared at the number. One problem, she didn't know how to use a phone. Show me how to dial this, she said, annoyed. Adele blinked. Are you serious? You're 15 and you don't know how to use a phone. Just do it. Adele rolled her eyes but took the paper, punched in the digits, and handed the phone back. She remained quiet but curious, listening closely as Wednesday lifted it to her ear, every line in her body still tense from the vision. Hello, Tyler answered. Wednesday, did you black out again? She asked bluntly. What? Tyler let out a nervous laugh. What do you mean? Are there any gaps in your memory you can't recall? No, I'm fine. Wednesday, what's going on? Did you have another vision? Yes. Tyler paused. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. Well, I'm glad you're worried about me. How about this? I'll call you every breakfast, lunch, and dinner until you get back. I'll just borrow Eden's. Or use the hotel's phone to call you. So you better answer the phone. All right. Wait, whose phone are you using now? My cousin's. Cousin? Adele. She's chaperoning me on this trip. Apparently I can't be trusted not to make an escape. Wow. It's kind of amazing they know you so well they anticipated your next move. Got it. I'll call you back later then. Wednesday hung up. Adele smirked at her for the rest of the drive. You have a boyfriend, she teased. No, I don't, Wednesday said sharply. Back in Jericho, Sheriff Donovan Galpin stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, watching his son move around with casual ease. You need to stay away from that Addams girl, he said, voice firm. Tyler paused mid-step, frowning. Why are you bringing this up all of a sudden? Because she's dangerous and a bad influence, Donovan replied. Have you already forgotten she bombed the talent show during Loving Friday? That was just a few days ago. No one was hurt, Dad, Tyler said, immediately on the defensive. You act like she blew up the whole school. It was a prank. She admitted to using the talent show as an excuse to blow things up, Donovan said, his voice sharpening. I'm telling you, that family is full of killers. Tyler narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? Her father, Donovan said grimly. He killed someone during his time at Nevermore. Just like her, he walked away from it. No consequences. Tyler's voice lowered. She has a huge family. How do you know it was her dad? Donovan stepped closer. Because that old woman, her grandmother, paid people off to cover up her son's crime. The records were buried. Witnesses changed their stories. The case just disappeared. Tyler stared at him, stunned. You're serious? I've been in law enforcement long enough to know when something smells like a cover-up, Donovan said. And the Addams family's been getting away with things for generations. While the students scattered for spring break, blissfully unaware of the consequences their mischief had set in motion, the faculty remained behind, uncovering something extraordinary beneath the very foundations of Nevermore. A forgotten crate, a secret wall, and inside it, a legacy that would shake everything they thought they knew about their school's origins.